You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another anime review. As you can tell by the title of today's video, today we'll be talking about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is unique in the fact that each arc of the series focuses on a different main character in a different time period. So because of that, I've decided that I'm going to review the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure series in parts and review each arc individually. At the time of recording this video, I've so far seen all of Phantom Blood, which is the first arc, and all of Battle Tendencies, which is the second arc, and then I'll probably start Stardust Crusaders after I get done recording this review. So, today we'll be talking about Phantom Blood, and this is talking about the 2011 series that is still ongoing to this day, because the older OVAs are actually a lot harder to find, so I've just been watching the current JoJo series, which is on Crunchyroll. There will be spoilers ahead in this video, but as always, I will warn you before I get to them. Phantom Blood starts out the year that Jonathan Joestar was born. Jonathan Joestar being the main character of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Phantom Blood. And on the night when he was born, his father was in a stagecoach accident, which killed his mother. A thief by the name of Dario Brando shows up in order to loot the bodies. But when he's trying to loot George Joestar, which is Jonathan's father, George wakes up and mistakes Dario Brando for trying to save his life. And because of that, he decides he owes Dario Brando a debt. Then flash forward 12 years later, where Jonathan is 12 years old, Dario Brando passes away, and his son Dio Brando goes to stay with the Joestars, who agree to take care of him in order to repay their debt to the Brandos. And because of this, Jonathan and Dio are raised together as brothers. Jonathan is very warm and welcoming to Dio, whereas Dio is by far the biggest asshole I have ever seen in an anime. The very first scene Dio's introduced, he knees Jonathan's dog in the face. He starts spreading rumors about Jonathan all around, making his friends stay away from him. He forces Jonathan's girlfriend to kiss him, taking her first kiss from her. And then eventually, the worst thing he does, and this is where things get a little bit spoilery because some of this happens in later episodes, but eventually he does actually start poisoning George Joestar, Jonathan's father. And he almost gets away with it, but Jonathan catches him in the act and goes to find an antidote for the poison. Another thing that's worth mentioning is throughout this whole story, there's been this mysterious stone mask that the Joestars have had. And eventually Dio notices that this mask reacts to people's blood, and so he wants to test it because it shoots out these spikes when it reacts to blood, so he thinks, I'm going to use this on Jonathan, and it'll kill him by stabbing him in the head. But he tests it on a random homeless guy, and it turns that homeless guy into a vampire, which gets super strength, who almost kills Dio, but then the sunlight kills the vampire instead. Later on, if you've seen later arcs of JoJo, then you know what happens with Dio with this mask. Dio does actually use the mask himself to become a vampire. When he does this, though, he uses the blood of George Joestar, who he kills in order to do it. Which, of course, makes things a lot more personal for Jonathan wanting to go get revenge. Also, when Jonathan went to get the cure, he met this thug named Speedwagon, and Speedwagon becomes a recurring companion in Phantom Blood, and he actually later carries on over to Battle Tendencies, but we'll get to that next time. Anyway, Dio gets shot out the window by the police and then runs away. Being a vampire, he's able to regenerate and create zombie minions. He goes and does this and bides his time while he regains his strength and creates an army to kind of take over. Dio's ultimate goal throughout Phantom Blood is to steal the Joestar family fortune. While Dio is away biding his time and getting his strength back, Jonathan encounters a guy named Baron Zappelli, who teaches him this ancient fighting style known as Hammon, which uses energy within your body through controlled breathing and blood flow in order to kind of mimic the energy of the sun, which obviously vampires can't handle. It can kill them. So Jonathan trains in Hammon, and eventually he does have his final battle with Dio. Here's where things get even more spoilery again. We've had spoilers throughout, but this is where it gets to the end of the arc, so you have been warned. Dio and Jonathan have their final battle, and Jonathan seemingly defeats Dio. He beats the shit out of him, and it gets close, and Jonathan himself gets hurt a bit, and eventually he decapitates Dio and throws him off the roof. Meanwhile, one of Dio's minions, named Wing Chun, comes over and steals Dio's head and says, "Don't worry, Master Dio, we'll find you a new body." Meanwhile, Jonathan gets on a boat to set sail for New York for his wedding because he meets up with his girlfriend again and they get engaged. So they get married and they're going off on their honeymoon to New York. Meanwhile, Wing Chun has taken Dio aboard the boat and is planning to revive him by stealing Jonathan's body. Jonathan and Wing Chun have a fight, And Dio also fights there, because even though he's just ahead, he still has his kind of abilities that he can use. However, at this point, Dio has actually gained a lot of respect for Jonathan due to the fact that he was able to put him into that state. to the point where when Wing Chun starts talking bad about Jonathan, he tells him to stop. He'll have no bad words about Jonathan. Big battle breaks out, and ultimately, Jonathan actually dies. But he does blow up the boat, presumably killing Dio. And I say presumably for a reason that we'll get to in later arcs, which, if you've seen JoJo, you know exactly why. But when he does blow up the boat, Jonathan's wife, Erina, who is pregnant at the time, saves a baby, who will also be important later on, and takes her and sails away. And that's where Phantom Blood ends. So, what do I think of Phantom Blood? I got really fucking drawn into Phantom Blood, because I've been meaning to watch JoJo for a while, but I always felt that people kind of overhyped it. But then when I actually watched through Phantom Blood, I'm like, this is actually really fucking good. This is one of the best animes I've ever seen. Because, you know, the JoJo fanbase likes to say, oh, JoJo's the best anime ever. And if you disagree, you're just wrong. And while I don't think it is the best ever, watching through Phantom Blood definitely made me see why JoJo had a good reputation. However, usually that reputation is garnered by Stardust Crusaders, which again, I haven't watched yet, but I have seen bits and pieces of. I think Phantom Blood actually deserves more love, because a lot of people actually skip over both Phantom Blood and Battle Tendencies and just watch Stardust Crusaders because it's a fan favorite. When really, I think watching Phantom Blood is the way to start, because there's a lot of important plot points that carry over to the later arcs that, if you don't watch Phantom Blood, you're gonna not really understand the full context. For instance, in Stardust Crusaders, spoilers a little bit for that, but it's the beginning of Stardust Crusaders, and it just kind of spoils the kind of twist at the end of Battle Tendencies a little bit, but we'll get to Battle Tendencies in the next video. But anyway, in Stardust Crusaders, Dio comes back with Jonathan's body, as you can imagine, and they make this big deal about it in Stardust Crusaders, but if you haven't watched Phantom Blood, you have no idea who the fuck Dio is. And I also think that Phantom Blood has a lot of things that the later arcs don't have. It has a lot of, like, really good horror atmosphere and elements, and while there are some horror elements in later arcs, particularly in Battle Tendencies, there's a part where one of the Pillarmen actually possesses somebody, which was actually genuinely creepy, but I'll get to that next time. It also has the Victorian London setting, which I think is just a ripe setting for horror, so I think that's really good. It's also, everything's a lot more on a personal level in Phantom Blood, because Dio ruined Jonathan's life. They grew up together, they're brothers, and everything's a lot more personal and close to home in that. And I like that a lot, because the later arcs, things become on more of a grand scheme. Like, for instance, in Battle Tendencies, they have the Pillarmen, which are kind of a threat to the world, and while it does get personal later on, Phantom Blood is personal from the start. Not to mention, I fucking love Speedwagon. Speedwagon's such a good character. He's introduced as just like this street thug, but it turns out he's actually really honorable, and he's a caring friend, and I like that a lot. Another thing, I think stands are kind of overrated. Hammond, I feel, is a much cooler fighting thing than stands are in the later arcs. Again, I haven't actually watched the later arcs yet, but I've seen bits and pieces of it, and Hammond to me seems cooler just because it's still you carrying out the attack, like, using, like, you know, your own sort of energy to defeat your enemy, whereas stands, while it's still kind of you, it's also kind of like another person, so I don't think it's as cool. While I do think stands still are cool, I think Hammond was really cool and underrated. Phantom Blood gets overlooked a lot. It is the shortest of the JoJo arcs, comprising only 9 episodes of the anime, as opposed to the 17 episodes that are in Battle Tendencies, and then the 40 episodes average for the rest of for each of the others after. The one thing that I think Phantom Blood maybe falls short on compared to the other arcs is Jonathan's personality is very minimalist. The main things he has going for them is how pure he is, how honorable he is, and how chivalrous he is. He doesn't have a whole lot of other personality to that. And while I think it's done really well, and I think that he's still by far an amazing character, he's kind of one-dimensional compared to some of the later Joestars. For instance, I think Joseph Joestar has a lot of personality in comparison, which again we'll get to him next time when I talk about Battle Tendencies. Jonathan's development, even though he doesn't have a lot of it, is done really well. So even though they took kind of a cliched anime hero backstory for him, they did it really well. So although that is my one criticism of it, it's still well enough done that it's something that I can easily overlook. Anyway, that does it for my review of Phantom Blood. I highly recommend watching Phantom Blood if you haven't. It's so underrated. Well, I do obviously think that, you know, hardcore JoJo fans have probably already seen it. I think if you're one of those people that started with Stardust Crusaders, maybe go back and give Phantom Blood a try, because it's definitely worth watching. Anyway, this has been Fugitive Red Eye, and you have a great day.